Hollywood loves legends until the legend has a truth it can't monetize. In this episode of Silent Fame, we're going back to the era when being gay was a career-ending rumor, and HIV was treated like a moral crime. 10 icons, 10 lives lived in coded smiles, safe headlines, and private fear. Watch closely, because the real tragedy wasn't just the virus. It was the silence that came with it. 1. Rock Hudson, the heartthrob who became the face they didn't want. Hollywood sold Rock Hudson as pure American safety, 6'5", baritone voice, movie star grin, the kind of perfect man studios could insure like property. Behind that poster was a life lived in code. Rumors circled for years, and the answer was always the same. Deny, deflect, date the right women, smile on cue. When gossip columns sniffed too close, the machine did what the machine does. Agents, publicists, and quiet deals. Even marriage got used like a padlock on the closet door. Not romance, but reputation control. Then the epidemic arrived, and the closet stopped being a strategy and turned into a bunker. In the early 80s, AIDS wasn't a word you said out loud in polite company. It was a sentence. Hudson knew if the truth leaked, he wouldn't just lose roles. He'd become uninsurable, radioactive, a risk no producer wanted on set. So he performed twice, on camera and in real life, hiding doctors' visits, hiding weight loss, hiding fear behind professional lighting and a practiced smile. The cruelest scene wasn't even in a movie. It was Dynasty. He's cast opposite Linda Evans, and the script calls for romance while the public is drowning in misinformation and panic. Imagine living with the terror that your body has become a rumor, that intimacy is treated like a weapon, that one kiss could turn you into a monster in the tabloids. He chased treatment in secret, even traveling abroad for hope, while Hollywood chased silence. And when the diagnosis became public in July 1985, the panic didn't just hit him, it splashed on everyone around him. Suddenly, the safe fantasy became a contaminated headline. He didn't come out like a celebration. He was forced into the light by a culture that demanded a straight dream. Until the moment it needed a cautionary tale. When he died on October 2, 1985, America finally looked at AIDS without the luxury of pretending it was someone else's problem. So here's the debate. Was Rock a victim of the system, or a man forced to keep the system running just to survive it? Drop your take in the comments, and if you want more stories Hollywood tried to bury, subscribe to Silent Fame. 2. Liberace, the emperor of glitter who went to war with the truth. Liberace wasn't just famous, he was a fantasy business. Furs, rhinestones, and a candelabra perched on the piano like a crown. His whole act was basically camp with a Vegas budget. Yet he guarded one thing like state secrets, the idea that he was straight. Because he understood the rule of that era, if the public saw a gay man, the dream might shatter, and so would the money. So he built a persona that was flamboyant in style, but safe in the story he told. When the press hinted at what everyone in showbiz whispered, Liberace didn't shrug it off. He sued. In 1959, he famously won a libel case against a British newspaper for implying he was homosexual. That victory didn't prove he was straight. It proved how terrified the era was of letting a star be known. And in a way, it became his cage. He had legally stamped denial onto his brand. Now he had to keep performing the lie forever, smiling for the blue-haired ladies, while living a private life he could never name. Then, the 80s arrived, and the epidemic turned rumor into terror. As his health collapsed, the explanations got more surreal. Weight loss, a diet, weakness, exhaustion. His team even floated the infamous watermelon diet story to reporters as the tabloids circled his Palm Springs gate. Anything but the word AIDS. Not because the word was too medical, but because it was too moralized. AIDS meant punishment in the public imagination, and Liberace was terrified of being remembered as a taboo instead of a legend. The palimony suit from former companion Scott Thorson blew the door open. Allegations, settlements, legal threats. Suddenly, the glitter couldn't blind people anymore. And even after his death on February 4th, 1987, the fight continued. Early statements leaned on safer-sounding causes, while official findings later confirmed the AIDS-related reality. The story became a battle over the last thing he controlled, the headline. So here's the question that will split the comments. Was Liberace protecting his audience, or protecting a lie that taught the world to fear gay truth? Tell me your take below, and subscribe to Silent Fame for more stories Hollywood polished, buried, and prayed you'd forget. 3. Anthony Perkins, Psycho's star who lived with a secret bigger than any script. Before he was Norman Bates, Anthony Perkins was a heartthrob. Sensitive, intelligent, the kind of leading man who made audiences lean in. Then Psycho turned him into an icon and a prisoner. Hollywood loved him as long as he stayed mysterious, as long as the rumors never became a headline. Because the whispers were always there. Perkins had relationships with men in an era when being openly gay could end your career overnight. Biographers have written that he tried to fix himself through therapy and intense self-control. Imagine treating your own desire like a defect just to stay employable. That's the tragedy of the Lavender Contract. You don't just act straight on camera, you act straight in your own body every day until you forget where the performance ends. In 1973, he married photographer Barry Berenson. They had 2 sons, and people still argue about what the marriage meant. Was it love? Was it camouflage? Was it both? That ambiguity is exactly what closeted Hollywood created. Lives that can't be read cleanly because the system punished clarity. Then AIDS entered the story like a curse you couldn't rewrite. Perkins kept his health fiercely private while he kept working, because being known as HIV positive in the early 90s could make you disappear professionally. And the most brutal twist? Reports say he learned his status was public, not from a carefully chosen confession, but from a tabloid story. Imagine reading your own death sentence while standing in a checkout line. He died September 12, 1992. After his death, his family released a statement naming AIDS directly and asking for compassion and education, because even then, silence felt like the default, and truth felt like a risk to everyone left behind. And the coda is almost too cinematic to believe. Barry Berenson later died on September 11, 2001, on American Airlines Flight 11. 2 tragedies, 9 years apart, stitched together by history. So let's argue it out. Did Perkins owe the public honesty? Or did the public and Hollywood owe him safety first? Comment your take and subscribe to Silent Fame for the stories the industry trained us not to see. 4. Amanda Blake, Miss Kitty, and the Respectable Lie. For 19 years, Amanda Blake was Miss Kitty on Gunsmoke, tough, trusted, and everywhere in America's living rooms. That's why her ending didn't feel like a celebrity death. It felt like a culture shock. Blake had already lived through a public health story people could handle. She battled oral cancer in the late 70s and later became associated with cancer awareness, the kind of suffering the public knows how to applaud, because it doesn't come with moral panic. Then the AIDS era hit, and illness stopped being just illness. It became accusation. She married Mark Spaeth in 1984. Within a year, he died of AIDS-related pneumonia, and in that time period, people didn't ask gentle questions. They looked for someone to blame. They treated HIV like a scandal before they treated it like a virus. When Blake died in August 1989, the first story handed to the public was the safe one: cancer. But later, her doctor revealed the truth. She died from viral hepatitis after a year-long battle with AIDS. And the detail that keeps her story burning? Even then, the how stayed murky. Her doctor said she wasn't a needle user and hadn't gotten it from a transfusion. So the silence filled itself, fast with suspicion, gossip, and whatever prejudice people already carried. That's the tragedy. She had to be innocent to be mourned properly. She had to fit a narrative to deserve empathy. And here's the sickest part. Friends said she feared the AIDS label would damage the animal and wildlife causes she cared about most. Imagine dying and still worrying stigma will punish the work you leave behind. So let's fight in the comments. Why did she need to be pure to be treated like a human? Drop your take and subscribe to Silent Fame for more stories Hollywood tried to sanitize. 5. Denholm Elliott, the gentle professor with a life they wouldn't let him admit. Denholm Elliott played safe better than almost anyone. On screen, he was the warm, absent-minded scholar type, harmless, lovable, trustworthy. In the AIDS panic era, that image wasn't just branding, it was protection. Off camera, his life didn't fit the tidy script the industry prefers. Accounts describe him as bisexual, and he and his wife Susan had an open marriage. Private truth, private rules, not chaos to them. But to an industry obsessed with clean labels, it was combustible. Then comes a Silent Fame twist. He was diagnosed HIV positive in 1987. In a fair world, that's a medical chapter. In Hollywood, it was a career hazard. Insurance fears, set panic, and the quiet threat of being dropped without explanation. So he did what legends did in that era. Kept working, kept smiling, kept the truth sealed. The irony is brutal. He received a national honor, CBE, while carrying a secret society would have punished him for. Applause in public, concealment in private, the stigma tax. He died in October 1992 of AIDS-related tuberculosis at his home in Ibiza. The public remembered the gentleman. But the real story is the hidden labor, managing rumors, managing fear, staying employable while your body is collapsing. So what do you call that? Dignity or captivity? Tell me below. And subscribe to Silent Fame if you want more safe images built on unsafe silence. 6. Ian Charleson, the Chariots, hero who turned Hamlet into a goodbye. Ian Charleson's face meant purity to the public, the principled runner from Chariots of Fire. But behind the curtain, he was gay, diagnosed with HIV in 1986, and living in an era that treated AIDS like a curse you deserved. What makes his story devastating isn't only that he was sick, it's that he refused to vanish. In 1989, after Daniel Day-Lewis left the National Theatre's Hamlet, Charleson stepped in, while seriously ill. His face was swollen from septicemia, and to protect the production and avoid public hysteria, a cover story circulated. He was recovering from a sinus operation. That polite lie says everything about the time. The audience gets Shakespeare, the actor gets erased. Night after night, he performed with death in his body and silence around his name. Makeup and lighting hiding the damage, and culture hiding the truth. He finished the run, then died in January 1990, only weeks later, and then he did something that should punch the room quiet. He asked that the announcement of his death state AIDS plainly, to force the conversation Britain was avoiding. No euphemisms, no long illness, just truth. So here's the question. Is that bravery? Or is it proof the world was so cruel that honesty counted as courage? Comment your take and subscribe to Silent Fame. The next stories get even darker. 7. Dack Rambo, the soap opera hunk who refused to die. Quietly. Dack Rambo was built for the camera. Square jaw, beach body confidence. The kind of TV beauty that gets hired to be the new heat on a long-running show. On Dallas, he played Jack Ewing, eye candy with a famous last name, dropped into America's biggest primetime machine. And that machine had rules. Be desirable, be uncomplicated, be straight in the headlines, even if your real life didn't fit the script. Behind the scenes, Rambo later described a career full of whispers about his sexuality, about who he dated, about what the industry would do if the wrong person decided to confirm it. Then HIV entered the story, and the fear changed shape. In the early 90s, being rumored gay could stall your career. Being rumored HIV positive could end it. Not with a public firing, Hollywood rarely gets that honest, but with your contract isn't being renewed, the writers are going another direction, insurance concerns, and a phone that suddenly stops ringing. In 1991, Rambo made a move almost nobody dared. He spoke publicly about being bisexual and living with HIV. That wasn't a confession. It was a hostage escaping the basement. He didn't want tabloids to own his ending, to turn his body into a punchline or a warning label, so he took the narrative back, knowing it could cost him jobs, friendships, and the last scraps of privacy he had left. And here's the darkest part. Even after he tried to own the truth, the gossip machine didn't suddenly become ethical. Accounts from that era describe reporters hovering, hunting final quotes, treating a dying man like content. That's the real horror of silent fame. When you're sick, you're not allowed to be human. You're a headline somebody wants to cash. So, what do you call Rambo's choice? Brave? Reckless? Or the only way to stop being somebody else's secret? Drop your take in the comments and subscribe to Silent Fame if you want the stories Hollywood tried to keep off screen. 8. Brad Davis, the star who hid like a spy until he couldn't take it anymore. Brad Davis exploded with Midnight Express, raw, sweating, electric. The industry pitched him as the next great American truth teller. But behind the acclaim was a man fighting more than addiction and pressure. There were long-running rumors about his private life, and in that era, rumors weren't gossip, they were weapons. If the wrong executive believed you were too risky, you didn't get judged on talent. You got erased. Then came the cruel timeline. Davis was diagnosed with HIV in the mid-80s, right when panic was loud and information was weak. And Hollywood didn't do nuance. HIV didn't mean patient. It meant problem. It meant uninsurable. It meant sets whispering like you were dangerous to stand near. So he did what so many men did. He vanished inside his own life. Treatment under the radar. Hospital visits handled quietly. A public image kept upright with the last of his strength. Because he still had to work, still had to provide, still had to pretend nothing was happening while his body was turning on him. The secret that makes his story burn is what came later. He reportedly began shaping a tell-all, notes and proposals about the fear, the discrimination, the industry hypocrisy. Not a pity memoir, a warning, a middle finger to the system that let stars die privately as long as the brand stayed clean. By 1991, the pain was overwhelming. Davis died from a drug overdose, and later accounts from those closest to him described it as intentional, an ending chosen to avoid a slower, crueler collapse. That's not dramatic. That's desperation in a world that offered him silence instead of safety. So here's the fight I want in the comments. Was Brad's secrecy protecting his family, or protecting an industry that didn't deserve it? Say what you think, and subscribe to Silent Fame. The next names will prove just how expensive silence really was. 9. Howard Ashman, the Disney genius who wrote hope while the world wanted silence. Howard Ashman didn't die in front of a camera. He died behind the songs that raised a generation. Disney's Renaissance has a soundtrack, and his fingerprints are all over it. The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin. But the secret part of his legend is what it cost to keep that magic alive while his own life was being treated like a liability. In the late 80s and early 90s, AIDS wasn't just a diagnosis, it was a stigma people thought you deserved. So Howard did what queer artists have always done when the room is unsafe. He turned truth into art and hid the bruises in the melody. Imagine writing part of your world, while the real world is arguing whether gay men should be pitied, punished, or erased. Imagine building a fairy tale about love breaking a curse, while you're living inside a culture that thinks your illness is a punchline. He kept working as his health declined, because stopping meant losing control of the only thing he could still steer. The story. People close to those productions have described how sessions were arranged around his condition. The work protected, the brand protected, while the man had to stay quiet to keep everyone else comfortable. And then, Beauty and the Beast releases, and the studio slips a confession into the credits like a folded note you find years later. To our friend Howard, who gave a mermaid her voice and a beast his soul. Not a headline, not a campaign, just a whisper that admits the truth without ever saying the word that terrified everyone. So, here's the fight for the comments. Should Howard have had to disappear into professionalism to keep a family empire comfortable? Or is the real tragedy that his work was allowed to be immortal, while his life had to be kept polite? If you grew up on those songs, tell me what you feel right now. And subscribe to Silent Fame. 10. Colin Higgins, the hitmaker who turned his success into a lifeline. Colin Higgins gave the world Harold and Maude, the kind of film that makes outsiders feel less alone. Then he helped shape 9 to 5, a cultural slap to sexism wrapped in comedy. He was clever, bankable, quotable, the exact kind of creator Hollywood claims to protect. And yet, when the epidemic came for him, his story didn't become a moment. It became another quiet exit. Here's the hidden power move. Higgins didn't just fear the stigma, he outsmarted it. As he got sick, he quietly funneled his money into LGBTQ+ causes and AIDS-related support, building infrastructure, while the mainstream still treated the crisis like a moral rumor. No PR, no applause, just resources moving in the dark so other people wouldn't have to die alone. That's where the drama lives, because it exposes the era's cruelty. The industry could market his movies, quote his lines, cash his checks, but it couldn't offer safety if he was labeled the wrong thing. So Higgins built his own safety net and handed it to strangers. Imagine having access to the loudest microphones in town and realizing the safest way to help is still to whisper. And that raises the uncomfortable question. If he had gone public, would Hollywood have rallied? Or would they have quietly closed doors, called him difficult, and moved on to the next hitmaker? We'll never know, because the era punished honesty like a crime. He died young, and the machine kept rolling because the machine always rolls. But his legacy kept working because he designed it to. And that's the lesson he leaves behind. When the world won't call you acceptable, you can still choose to be generous, strategic, and brave. So let's debate. Is quiet giving a form of courage? Or did silence let the system off the hook? These stories aren't just about losing stars. They're about what it costs when a world forces people to perform normal just to stay alive. If you've ever had to hide who you are to keep your job, your family, or your safety, this is for you. Which name hit you the hardest and why? Drop your thoughts below, debate respectfully, and subscribe to Silent Fame, because the truths they buried still matter.